All right. All right. Hello, I'm Dan Crozier here, with my little interview show, Talking Plaettes, and I've brought my friend Steve Seagle uh, of Man of Action, and thanks for coming on, Steve. I've been chatting with you for the last couple of years, I think, um, and just absolutely enthralled with the amount of work that you yourself have done, but also with Man of Action, and just an amazing body of work. But Steve, if you could, just tell us a little bit of about yourself and how you've gotten into creative writing.
Sure. So I'm a former Colorado guy myself. Now I'm visiting you from sunny California. Went to the University of Colorado, went to Coronado High School in the Springs, and my dad was in the Air Force. We traveled around a lot. And my parents, I think, compensating for that, bought us Mad Magazine and comic books as kids. I loved the Mad Magazine. I didn't love the comic books as much. Avengers '89 scared me, so I was like, no more of those. Later on, my high school buddy Eric Kopish, who still lives in Colorado, got me into comics again, and then I was hooked. So while I was at the University of Colorado, I used to shop at Time Warp, and they'd have all these comic creators come in back before there was an internet, and back before that was a thing you saw much, the people who made this stuff. And one of the people I met was Matt Wagner, and I was like, oh my gosh, people do this for a living. Nice. And so I decided I would send in proposals from my dorm room in Boulder and become a comic book writer, even though I had never written anything, didn't know how they were made. And I sent in something and it got bought.
Wow.
And then I have classes and stuff, and I don't have an artist, and I can't draw, and I don't know how to do production or letter. I had to learn all of that on the fly because there were deadlines. And so that was my first book, which was called Kafka. I think I'm sitting, it's right up there. Yay.
Oh, sweet.
And learned on the fly, got nominated for an Eisner Award right out of the gate, lost to Watchmen. I voted for Watchmen myself, so that's okay. And that was it. I kind of fell into it. That's a theme in my life, is up until recently, everything was by accident.
Nice. Wow, that's pretty exciting. That's actually something I didn't know about you.
That's why I'm here, Dan.
Yep. No, God, that's fantastic. So, kind of hopping along, you and a couple other, creative partners formed Man of Action. How did that come about?
So that's Joe Kelly, Joe Casey, Duncan Rouleau. Joe and Joe are both comic book writers. Duncan's a comic book writer and artist. And we had known each other in various ways. Joe Casey worked at a bookstore by where I lived in Burbank at the time. Joe Kelly and I met because we both got assigned the X-Men the same day. I thought I would hate him because he was too young. I had worked 10 years and he had just gotten out of college, and we both got the same job. I was like, what? How does that happen? I met him and he was great. Duncan and I had worked on some comics together and had some mutual friends. So all of us wound up on the X-Men at more or less the same time. Joe Casey on Cable, Joe on Adjective, me on Uncanny. Duncan was drawing X-Force or X-Factor. I always get that wrong. I think it's X-Factor. And we would go to these story conferences and sit and figure out what's going to happen in the X-Men for the year. And they were a little maddening. There were too many people with too many different ideas. It was fun, but it was not a great way to figure that all out, I don't think. And what we decided was that the four of us really liked the way each other was thinking. Not that we thought the same way, we're very different, but we understood where the other people were coming from. And gradually we all left the X universe, migrated over to Superman slowly, one at a time. I was the last to go. And again, there were problems in that world because the Superman movie with Brett Ratner had fallen apart. And Dan DiDio came into my very first story conference and said, we don't want any attention drawn to these books for the next year. We're trying to set the movie back up. I was like, well, that's not really the year in which I want to do my work, so that nobody will notice what's happening.
Right.
And again, I liked the guys, didn't like the corporate. So we decided, what if we left the corporate and just made a collection of the four of us to make stuff up, which is what we were doing for these big companies. And we could still work for these big companies, but we do it as Man of Action, a separate company, as opposed to for freelancers. So that was the intentional part. The unintentional part was we just wanted a table at San Diego Comic-Con, and you had to have a company name. So Joe Kelly told them that our name was Man of Action, just so we could get a booth and sit down as opposed to walking around that convention. So those two things kind of happened at the same time, and Magic Dust, it became a company. And one of the very first things that happened was Matt Senreich of Robot Chicken, who used to work at Wizard, had interviewed Joe Kelly and I when he was at Wizard, and came up to us at our new booth and was like, Man of Action, you guys can make up a superhero cartoon for Cartoon Network, can't you? And we're like, sure. And that's how Ben 10 was born, which kind of defined us as a company, making up that show, got us into animation, has us doing a lot of things like that. Here we are 20 years later.
Nice. That's fantastic. Yeah, the way I always kind of pictured it was like a group of you, like kind of like some of the artists, back in the 40s and 50s, like de Kooning and Pollock, meeting over, in a seedy, dingy bar, with a lot of smoke and just drinking up ideas and stuff.
Hey, I love Pollock, so I love the reference already.
Yeah.
I thought it was a hack. I used to have that Masterpiece board game, and there was a Pollock in there, and I was like, this thing is stupid, and throw it away. And then I saw it. I went to, I think I was in France, Paris. They had a Pollock up on the wall, and when you see one in person, you go, oh, it's a whole different experience. And then I saw the one from Masterpiece was at the MoMA in New York, and it's massive. And I literally, it was like a 3D poster. It was like jumping out at me, and I wasn't stoned or anything.
Yeah.
So I was like, what is going on with this painting? So I became a huge Pollock fan. So I like your reference.
Nice. Fantastic.
We didn't initially have any offices or anything. We would meet at Duncan's art house, which was a shed behind his house. That maybe used to be a garage or something. So yes, we did meet in dingy, dankly lit places to make up things like Big Hero 6 before we got offices.
That's pretty cool. I mean, that's all I know is, the only upscale is whenever, Elise lets me use, her kitchen so I can set up these interviews.
You can make a fake blood or.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Otherwise, I'm at my shop next to, some kind of fake cadaver and stacks of wood and, anything that'll probably, kill you or give you at least a nice, thick splinter.
Yeah.
And, that Black Widows and mice, those are mostly my companions. So I keep good company. So yeah, that sounds really exciting. I'm still getting over the fact that your first book was Kafka. Is that still in print?
Still in print because I owned it. I did it for Renegade Press, which was the spinoff of Aardvark Vanaheim when Cerebus, Dave and Denny Lubera got divorced. She got half the titles, and he kept Cerebus, and they each had their own company.
Okay.
And we had a Ted McKeever book, I think, that fell through the cracks and had to replace it in a printing schedule quickly. And that's the reason she picked up Kafka. She's like, look, if you can get the first issue done in 45 days, I'll publish it.
Nice.
I was like, sure, I can do that. And, I had to learn a lot on the fly.
Wow.
And then literally every 30 days after that, Stefano Gaudiano, who was up until recently inking The Walking Dead, he was at CU as well. And he was the guy who became the artist on the book, thanks to our mutual friend, Dayton Taylor, who introduced us. So he and I just literally had to write, draw, pencil, ink, covers, design, 32 pages a month while going to school at Boulder.
That's intense. That right there is a full-time, 16-hour day job plus school. How many printed out?
You don't know what you're doing.
Right.
You know what we're doing. Definitely had done a couple of fan press comics, Crimson Dreams and stuff, but I'd done nothing.
Yeah. So he did some zines then, is that right?
Yeah, there was a Colorado collective that put out a thing called Crimson Dreams, and it was a semi-pro, it was quality stuff, but just locally distributed. So he at least knew, like page dimensions and stuff. And this is mostly pre-computer. So all the type in the book, I had to go get typeset at a typeset house, bring it back to my dorm room in Williams Village, cut it apart with now my wife, Lisa Reinhardt, but at the time just friend, and paste it down, you know, send it off to be photographed for print plates. Like, it was old school.
Man, that is really fucking cool. Holy cow. Yeah, I remember when and this was like 14 years ago when I was, you know, putting together my first comic book. I don't know what I was doing. I'm a fine artist. I do gallery, you know, work and conceptual things. And I had gotten hired to write and illustrate, you know, a couple little horror shorts. And I didn't know how to do text, so I did exactly what you did. I just print out you know, all the text and everything, and cut out the letters and just paste them on wood. And I was
Yeah,
like, wow,
exactly.
yeah. I was like, wow, what a cool look. Especially, you know, for a horror comic, it really lent itself well to that mood.
Well, and the difference being that I'm assuming you printed that out from a computer, and we
Right.
literally had to go to a typeset house, which was somewhere on, what's that street in Boulder that runs by the creek, like Arapahoe, I think,
Okay.
and pay somebody hundreds of dollars to output the same stuff every month, because I had to make completely new pages, even though they were similar formatted, because I'd sent the other ones off to Canada to be printed.
Oh,
So
geez.
I hadn't gotten them back yet. So I don't know what I was doing. I'm surprised it happened. I lettered the book, and I don't know how to letter. I was like trying to learn how to make a rapidograph pen work. I still don't know how.
Yeah.
It was a lot. I'm grabbing it.
Excellent.
So the only, there we go. If anybody's interested, Kafka. This is now comes out through Image Comics. It's all done in one. It's like a spy thriller book. And the only thing I changed over time, two things, is that the lettering got redone. Richard Starkings went back through and fixed that.
Oh, okay, nice. I like Richard.
And we added color, but it's still in black and white. We added black and white to black and white. So for reasons I can't talk about now, but I'll tell someday in the future.
Okay. Man, that's cool. So with that, Matt, that's a massive learning curve. You know, and then, you know, you're bringing in, you know, your friend at the time, and now your wife. You know, was that the beginning of like your relationship, or you know, how did that come about?
No,
Question.
you know, Liesl I met through the speech team at Boulder. We were on the speech and debate team, and most of my college career up there was, what can I major in that won't get in the way of my speech tournaments, and how do I take classes that are only on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, so I can travel for speech tournaments on Friday and Monday. And my whole social circle was the speech team, and Lisa was on the speech team. But when I met her, I hated her. I met her, another friend on the speech team was like, oh, this is Lisa, she's joining the speech team. And I was like, she was tense because she was auditioning for a play, and really gave me just a short shrift. And I was like, that girl is terrible. And then later I was like, that girl's for me. And she's like, I want nothing to do with you. And then like a decade later, we got.
Wow.
But at the time, there was this weird flirtation thing. And I really needed some labor to get that book produced every 30 days. So she would come over and help tear paper. There's all these torn paper motifs. I think they're, So like, well, this is not one, but so we had this art, and then we would just tear black paper.
Nice.
To frame it out for the design pages. And so she would come tear black wrapping paper that we bought at the mall and glue it down, all that stuff.
It's so fun that the simplest things, you know, have the most impact. I mean, that makes for, you know, striking design page there.
Well, now Photoshop. You don't need paper, you don't need anything. But I do say a lot that book, I tried a lot to get back to the things I didn't know then. You know, I didn't know a lot about writing, and so the writing solved itself. I didn't know about design, and so the design solved itself. And that can go badly, but it turned out okay. And now I go, am I overthinking this? Remember when I didn't know anything? It seemed to work out. So I'm trying to get back to a more primitivistic, impulse-driven creative process these days.
Well, yeah, is that like because you recently put out the book, you know, Get Naked. Was that a similar process too?
I like that I have visual aids here. Who knew?
Yeah, you're in the best. Is that the gift shop of your house? Is that what that is?
I got this bookcase on the street. It was just, you know, trash that was around. I was like, I'm gonna put that in my office, and if I ever do an interview, they'll sit me down in front of it, and all my shit will be right there. And
Yeah.
I've never, ever done an interview in front of this bookcase. I was like,
Oh,
damn, sitting a chair in front of this bookcase and I'll have all my books right there, like Get Naked.
yes.
Get Naked. So Get Naked was, it's a letting go of process. So I'm a very process guy. I like very much to have work systems, and I'll do things a certain way for a year or two, and then I throw it all out the window and change everything.
That's
And
good.
yeah, I think it is. I think it's how you stay.
Yeah.
I always have mottos going. Like my motto right now is everything works. And a year ago, that wasn't my motto at all. It was very like specific driven, and you have to have this thing. Now I go, everything works. So you tell me an idea, or I have an idea, and instead of going, that's not going to work, because I go, everything works. So how does that work?
Right.
And it makes you use your brain differently to come to a thing. So Get Naked was my brain going, I want to do essays. I like essays. But how does an essay function in comics? And I hate comics that have too many words, and yet essays are very word heavy.
Yeah.
So I spent about a year and a half going, well, it'll work. I just got to figure it out. And I turned on Photoshop, and I was like working with layouts and going, where do you put the text so it's not so irritating? And I could not crack it at all. So I put it aside. Then I teach at this animation and comic book school in Denmark once a year or twice a year. And the students there, not with me, but with, I think, maybe Matt Bors of the Nib or somebody, did journalistic comics. And they posted them online. And I'm like, that is how you put text in comics and not lose the comics.
Yeah.
So I pitched the school. I was like, look, I want to do these essays. I'm going to bring them over. I'll teach the class. I give them an actual education plan. I was like, if it turns out poorly, then it's just an exercise. If it turns out great, then I'll publish it through Image, if Image is willing to publish it. And Eric Stevenson is usually a trooper to publish whatever kind of weird thing I want to do. So that was nice of them. And they did them, and they turned out great. We did this. This is like a 250-page book. We did it in 10 days.
Oh, that's awesome.
19 artists. They each, from different countries, working in their own styles, their own ways.
That's fantastic.
I would come in every day and mess up their process, like add a page. Tell them that I didn't like suddenly it's in color. Suddenly you've got to cut 3-panel, just stuff to make it an exercise. And they really solved it. So it turned out well, and we published it, and that got nominated for 2 Eisners. What the hell? Yeah.
Well, congratulations on that. Hopefully, I'm sure the kids in your class, really learned a lot. I mean, on top of all their work too, they have to put together, this book with you.
Yeah, it definitely is a learning curve. I mean, they're a very talented bunch. It's a school that only takes 20 students in graphic novel every 2 years. So it's very selective. I've been doing it since the first class was there. A lot of talent in that program. But they work. Like, they each have a workstation. It's in this old army barracks in the middle of nowhere in Denmark. And, if you get them in the morning and go off and do a page and don't quit until 5, you can go up there at 5 and they're all sitting there working. I teach sometimes in the U.S., and U.S. students are also very good, but I don't know they have quite the same drive. Maybe a lot of it has to do with being isolated out in the middle of nowhere, Denmark, and there's nothing else to do, so you might as well keep doing it. But they really turned it out and did a great job. And the biggest challenge was just figuring out what to make it about, because I thought if I put out a book about that's essays, comic book essays, it's going to crash and burn unless it has the word sex, gun, or name in the title. So, like, well, do I want to tell my sex stories? Not yet. I don't like guns that much. So I guess it's going to be naked stories. And I'm never naked. I'm not a naked guy. So I was like, well, do I even have a naked story? And then it turned out I had 19 of them. So
nice. And these are all like just that. Is that more of an inhibition to get naked in different places? Is that right?
So the book is about how America used to be pretty naked, and then in the 70s really stopped cold turkey overnight, and suddenly denied it was ever really very naked. And that was kind of the world I grew up in. I remember when I was in Colorado going to junior high, you used to hear, oh, when you take gym class, you got to be naked in high school. And I was like, oh no, because I was a skinny little scrawny, pathetic dude. And I did not want to be naked for any reason. And then I got to high school and didn't have to be naked. There were showers, didn't really have to take one. There was swim class, wore a swimsuit. And so I was like, okay, well, that was whatever that was. It was overblown. Turns out that now, when I was researching for this book, what people were talking about was that in the 70s and well before the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, a lot of high schools, a lot of Ys, a lot of gyms, guys swam naked in school.
Wow.
Yeah. Or if you go to the Y to swim, you'd jump in the pool naked. It was segregated male, female, and the guys did not wear suits. And that was not a thing. Like now you go, well, what pervert initiated that and for what, to what end? And the answer is to no end, really. It was, some of it apparently had to do with not getting fibers in the very bad filtration systems of early pools. A lot of it was that culturally dudes were going to go into the service and service, you're going to be naked all the time. And this was just like a start now, get over it.
Interesting.
A lot of it was ruralism. You know, if you went skinny dipping, you're like, oh, let's go swim. Okay, here we go. And it was just not a thing. And then it became a thing. And you can track these, this is not really in the book, it's just research I did, but you can track these kind of like Dear Abby letters where people are like, my kid has to go to school next year and he doesn't want to swim in the nude. Why can't they wear suits? And Dear Abby's like, get over it. Everybody does it. It's no big deal. And then in like 1975, it's like, my kid has to go to school next year. And he heard he has to swim naked. And Dear Abby's like, well, that's not going to happen. That's not something that occurs and nor should they. And it's like, it's this weird overturn. So then I started traveling, mostly thanks to comics. And I would wind up naked other places in the world. And I'd be like, whoa, we don't get naked in America. And they'd be like, you're getting naked and coming in this sauna in Finland with us. And I was like, ah. And then you do it. And like 3 minutes into the sauna, you're like, who cares?
Yeah.
And so it's a book that's about my personal kind of no way to who cares journey. And then looking at why is it that way in America? Why is it not that way in other places? And what does that mean? That's a long fucking answer for the short question.
Yeah. Well, it's pretty interesting to kind of think about, the cultural inhibitions and then your own personal inhibitions too. How that plays out. I mean, what you described too with schools, like, basically pushing at least, boys, prior to 1975, to swim naked in a shitty filtered pool. I always associate that with, ruralism. And then, something that you would see like prior to World War II.
That's where it started.
Yeah.
That's where it continued for a while.
Yeah. So that's pretty interesting. You growing up like the 1950s, watching Leave It to Beaver, wouldn't have even thought about something like that.
Well, and again, like there's a Life magazine story that you can find pretty easily on the internet. And it's like, here's suburban kids in, I think it's like a Cleveland high school taking their swim lessons and they're all naked. They're like on the side of the pool doing the kicks and their butts are up in the water. You're like, wait, are they missing something? Nope, that was what it was.
Yeah.
I have a Korean spot here that I go to all the time. I have a writers group that meets there. And if you go, you're getting naked because that's part of that process. Because I went to Korea and I learned the process. I'm like, all right. And it's like people show up and they're like, oh, I don't think I can do this. 5 minutes later, they're like, yeah, who cares? I'm the most reticent to get naked person ever. And I wish somebody had just made me get naked when I was 14 and got over it then instead of waiting till I was 35 or whatever I was.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of what is that movie? Oh, Eastern Promises. Going to the Russian bathhouse, being Viggo Mortensen and having a knife stuck on you and having
if I got naked and somebody started punching me, I'd have a very different reaction to it all.
Right. Go in there trying to hide a knife, while naked. That'll be fun.
I've done the Russian sauna though. That's the getting beat with the leaves and stuff is pretty awesome. But they do not screw around with the heat. Like in the hot saunas, the Russian saunas, they use those branches a lot to bring the heat down from the ceiling.
Oh.
You're like, oh.
Yes. So it's fanning you down. Okay. Yeah. That'd be pretty intense.
It's crazy hot.
Nice. So one of the things like my sisters, they have a bunch of, well, they have kids, my nieces and nephews. And I mentioned to them that I'd be, talking to you because they're big fans of Ben 10. My kids are.
Did you know there's a Ben 10 Monopoly? This cool person from Australia sent me Ben 10 Monopoly from Australia.
Seriously?
Yeah.
It was so on the licensing end of that, is that like, do you guys, just have a ridiculous amount of licensing, or is that somebody, in Australia just did a knockoff?
No, it's not a knockoff. It's when Ben 10 first started, it was pretty good in the US, but it was huge globally. And the top merchandise country at some point was Australia. At some point was England. It's been Mexico. It's been Brazil. And kind of anywhere it blows up like that. Like I went down the streets in Argentina a couple of years ago, and there were Ben 10 piñatas that you could buy at newsstands. I was like, what?
That's amazing.
We went on a cruise once. Not a cruise, it was an overnight ferry, but we called it a cruise because that's cruises we're going to get. And the gift shop was literally half chocolate and postcards, half Ben 10 stuff in the middle between Sweden and Finland. You're like, what? I'm on a boat. Why is this stuff here? So yeah, it kind of comes alive in spurts and countries at different times.
Wow, that's pretty. That's got to be well, interesting, but also kind of flattering. Especially with all the traveling that you do, to see that stuff kind of translated in all these different languages and.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. I got invited by the embassy in Uruguay, puts on a Comic-Con.
Oh,
and
cool.
I got to go down there and just to see like 8, 9-year-old kids, boys and girls, line up. They don't know who I am really. They're just like, this is one of the Ben 10 creators. And they're like, they just like Ben 10. They could care less, if I was sitting there or some random person they pulled from a bus stop. The idea of Ben 10, what they like. And just to see how excited they are about that is phenomenal. So I do love that. I love seeing people who love it. And this year has been really weird because the kids who liked it when it first came on are all like 21, 22.
Right.
Now they're coming up being like, dude, you were my childhood. And that's awesome. Because, my childhood was Johnny Quest and I never got to meet the creators like Alex Toth or whoever of that. So it's fun.
That's pretty cool. How many different iterations of Ben 10 have there been? Because there was just so
Ben
much.
10, then Ben 10 Alien Force, then Ben 10 Ultimate Alien, Omniverse, and then the reboot Ben 10. So I think 5 so far.
Wow, that's amazing. Is you having to kind of reinterpret Ben 10? Is that just based off of like something like toy sales, or is it just what does that entail?
Well, there's a couple of answers. So one thing is, luckily we get to reinterpret it because it means it's still alive. So no reinterpret, no show. And that's because kids have to constantly discover it. It's like the very first Ben 10 fans really grew up with it and they watched it. And, as they turned 16, Ben turned 16 because it tracked that audience. But the problem with that is that audience, then their next step is cars, dating, booze and drugs if they go that way, college, like other things occupy them. And they may still have a soft spot for Ben in their heart, but they're no longer the audience overnight. Right. So the show has to always find a new 7, 8, or 9-year-old. And that person doesn't want their big brother or big sister's Ben 10. They want their own Ben 10. So it's got to be a new invention every time. So the part of it is just making sure it's a new show with all the stuff you still love about Ben 10, that a new kid can go, that's my Ben 10. Mine is Omniverse. Mine is the reboot. Mine is the original. They have to own it. The other part of it is just that it's a tough job with a lot of people working on it very diligently. And those people move on to other shows. So if you get a new director in, that director is going to have a new art style, and he or she is going to want to make that show look like what they do, not spend 3 or 4 years trying to emulate what somebody else did. And so a lot of people get very upset when the art style changes, but if you get a new crew in, it's going to reflect that crew. It's going to reflect those times. I love the art style of the original Ben 10, but if we put that out now, that doesn't look like a show from right now. That looks like a show from years ago. So it has to evolve or it dies.
Yeah, it seems to be like a model. Now that I think about it, yeah, that kind of mirrors like what you see, like for me, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. You
Yeah,
know, since the '80s and '90s with the TV show, and then of course the film, and then all the different iterations up until now.
yeah. I mean, it's the same thing. So part of it is the necessity of keeping it fresh. Part of it is who's working on it and what do they
Mhm.
bring.
That's pretty cool. It's really nice to be able, I think, to be able to speak to a number of generations of kids and have that much influence on
It's
the
cool,
show.
and also the four of us, Man of Action guys, we've all always agreed that we don't want to make a show that panders to kids. We want to make a show that kids love, and if their parents watch it with them, they don't hate.
Yeah.
Because like I loved Johnny Quest, but I can watch it now and go, oh, there's actually a good story here. I mean, they did shoot a lot of guns and stuff, which you can't do
Yeah.
now. Fighting as a kid, but it cared about the stories it was telling. It actually respected its characters, and that's just something we've tried to do on our stuff: is make sure that what we're making is solid for a kid, and if their parent watches it with them, they won't hate it. And we get a lot of parents who go, I actually like that show. I watch that show with, and that's the goal.
Yeah. Oh, that's pretty cool. With like something like Big Hero 6 too, were you trying to create a similar model? Because I think that started out as a comic book before, and then what, Disney picked it up?
Yeah, so Duncan and I made it up for Alpha Flight, and we were well down the road at that point of going, don't make up stuff for big corporations because they'll make a fortune and you will be screwed.
Right.
So we were doing our best to not make anything up, and that book was doing pretty well, but we knew it was going to get canceled for political reasons, and that turned out to be true. So at the end there, we were just trying to have fun before it all went up in flames, and we love this idea that Alpha Flight attacked the X-Men back in their own comic when I was buying comics at the Safeway.
Mm-hmm.
That I literally bought that issue where they showed up and started kicking butt. I'm like, what? Canadians? Who knew? And so Doug and I thought it would be a blast to do that to Canadians, but it's like, well, who would attack Canada? And I think Duncan was the one who said, well, not Japan, laughingly. And then we were like, well, definitely going to be Japan.
Yeah.
And then we were like, we have to make up a team that is so goofy that Marvel will do nothing with it. And Marvel was super dark at the time. Everything was like, Venom and evisceration and whatever. So we're like, okay, we'll make up something bright and sunny. It'll have no place in the Marvel universe. Therefore, they'll never be able to do anything with it. And we made up Big Hero 6 and turned in the script. And within literally a day, somebody called back from editorial and was like, we want to do a mini series of Big Hero 6. And we're like,
oh, wow.
That did not work at all. And I was doing 4 monthlies. I was doing Alpha Flight, X-Men, House of Secrets, Sandman Mystery Theater. And Duncan was drawing Alpha Flight. So we're like, we don't have time to do a miniseries to try to kill it. And then they just gave it to somebody else. We're like, wait. At least let us give you our notes and our Bible and our designs. That they can use that. I don't think they used that because the miniseries had nothing to do with what we had come up with to speak of.
Okay.
And so years later, when the movie got made, we actually went in to meet with the director, Don Hill. There were 2 directors, but at the time, just him. And he was like, you're going to be very upset. We've changed a lot of stuff. And he started showing us designs or whatever. And we're like, here's the original designs. And it was eerie how very similar everything was. He's like, well, you're probably not very upset. We're like, we're
not. Well, that's cool. That was the only involvement you had with the film then?
We found out about the film about 2 years into production.
Okay.
We were working with Marvel on the Spider-Man cartoon and the Avengers cartoon. And at the time, there were so many of these deals, like the Sony deal was problematic. And so for some reason, we could do a Spider-Man cartoon, but we could not use any Spider-Man villains. And so it was a struggle to go, well, who can we use? And it literally, we have these story conferences, Joe Quesada and Jeff Loeb and Man of Action guys and all the Marvel people and some of the writers. And we'd sit there and we'd be like, okay, can we use the Rhino? Nope, Spider-Man villain, can't use the Rhino. Like, okay, can we use Thanos? Nope, there's something going on, can't use Thanos. Can we use the leader? Well, the Hulk is tied up in a universal. So
Oh,
literally after just
jeez.
months of this, Duncan laughingly, after so many rejections, goes, "Can we use Big Hero 6?" And the room just went deadly silent. And Jeff Loeb's like, "What do you know about Big Hero 6?" I said, "I know that we created Big Hero 6. He's like, "Come out in the hallway." We went out in the hallway. He's like,
Wow.
"No, there's a feature, right?" We're like, "We do now. Tell us about it."
Oh my.
So
Yeah,
that's
geez.
how we found out.
That sounds like a lot of creative gymnastics, and to get that result.
Yes. Well, the upside was we had never signed our character agreements for all of that stuff, so they were very nice to us.
Ah, okay. Well, that on that end, that's good. Wow. Man, it seems like a pretty varied and storied career, and all for something that was not really intended to be.
No.
Yeah,
And
it's
no intention of working in comics, that's for sure.
it's pretty remarkable.
Or animation.
Yeah, I think you should have like a direct to streaming movie made about your creative life. It sounds like.
Oh, I
Um,
don't know if it's that interesting. I have a theater company, and that was because my wife was teaching some students on the speech team at her school. They
mhm.
all transferred to UCLA. They couldn't get cast in anything. There were gentlemen of different ethnicities than the casting seemed to be embracing.
Yeah.
And so they were like, "We got to make our own shit." And so we helped them write a show. And then it suddenly got signed to a national tour. And we toured
Cool.
this play for a decade. So I also fell into a theater company. I went to a meeting I live in a place called Altadena. And I went to a meeting of the Altadena Heritage, it's called. It's like a historical kind of preservation society. And I went to a meeting just to see what it was about. And it was the elections, and nobody would run for president. So I took it over. Like at my first meeting, not knowing what it was, I became the president.
That's all you had to do was show up.
Yeah. So we're in the process of getting certified to be foster parents. And I got this interview, and she was like, your written interview, you both said that or not both, but I said twice. She's like, on one question, you were like, you don't have any community involvement. And then in another question, you were like, you have a lot of community involvement. I was like, that's because when I get involved, I wind up in charge of something that I just wanted to observe.
Yeah.
I said, be very careful, because I tend to fall into career paths and jobs.
Yeah. Wow. That's pretty remarkable. So so it sounds like the two of you are looking to adopt kids, and that's very commendable, because there's so many people out there that they need a loving home, and they're God, some things are just so problematic. Elise used to foster a number of kids, and I think like something like 15 years ago, and now they're all in their 30s and have families of their own. And then my one of my sisters is looking to do that. She's already got 3 of her own kids, and I don't know how she's going to be able to pull that off, because they're all like, I think the oldest one is like 7. So it's like, oh my God. But yeah, that's something that I think personally is very is recommended and commendable if you have the resources to do it and the patience.
Well, we bought our house from a foster agency, and it was a house that they would send kids who were not going to be adopted to live in for a couple of years, and they would teach them how to do their laundry and how to cook and balance a checkbook. And then those kids would get emancipated, and they were on their own.
Yeah.
And when they sold this house and we bought it, I joked, I was like, oh my gosh, I think I would just have died if you had told me at 18 I had to take care of myself. We should adopt those kids if we're buying this house. Ha ha ha. And then a couple of years ago, we're like, no, we should adopt those kids. Like, let's literally start adopting these 15 and 16-year-olds who are not going to get adopted.
Yeah.
And put this house back to use for what it was being used for before, but in a better way. Well, not a better way, but in a more permanent way.
Yeah. No, that's great. That age group, nobody wants them. Or sometimes they're coming from homes or families that are just really devastating and kind of fucks them up. So
yeah, my wife had a student who was born in prison. His mom died in prison. He was foster system his whole life, didn't get adopted. And she just hired him to teach full-time at her college because he was an amazing student,
Mm-hmm.
super gunner, just very motivated. And I was like, well, I would adopt that guy. And she's like, he's 31. So we're not adopting him, but we're going to find the younger version of him or her.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's good. Good. Um, yeah. Yeah. And your wife, isn't she also like producing television stuff too?
She had a multi-year run as a reality TV, comedy TV development person, but she has now become a dean of performing arts at a local college. So
Oh, cool.
that she may go back to some of that in the future, but it is a full-time gig, especially when you have to transition your entire college to an online college overnight.
Yeah.
Because of the coronavirus.
Oh my gosh. I can't even imagine what that feat really entails.
Yeah, it was a lot because I was watching it unfold in our dining room. But also performing arts, it's like some classes you go, okay, I understand how to put calculus online. How do I put choir online?
Oh, well, I'd imagine it probably involves a lot of this. Of course,
Yeah.
the sound quality, kind of isn't always, the greatest thing, especially when things sound kind of garbled and it's just like,
but it's
how
also
do I
like the
scold this
Kafka.
kid?
It's like the Kafka comic book. The challenges create the interesting results you didn't know were possible. So
Yeah, the limitations breed innovation.
yep, I love limitations creatively.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah, as I mentioned, just me making comics on big stacks of wood boards and pasting print together. I still don't know Photoshop to save my life. I can edit film, which is weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that that's probably a little bit more of a complex process because there's so many more infinite things you can do. But
Well, on Photoshop, like I've never learned anything. I've just punted around on it, and so I'll spend 5 years doing something, and I'm pretty good on Photoshop. I can design. I like to design stuff because I can't draw, but at least I understand proportion and shit and color. And I'll do something, and then Marco Cinello, who did my Soul Kiss book that's somewhere back here, he'll go, there's a button that does that. Like you don't need to do 500 steps. You just push this button. And I'll be like, oh. And so then my next 5 years, I'm like, think that, I'm like, why did I spend 5 years? Why didn't I read a manual? So now I'm trying to learn Ableton, the music software. And I'm literally just going through every tutorial I can find so that I don't have somebody tell me 5 years from now, there's a button that actually quantizes all of that.
Yeah. That's really what I need to do is just sit down and watch tutorials. I started doing that where Elise and I are wrapping up our Stanley Kaiju book and, working with colorists. They come and they go. Yeah, she's like, why don't you just learn how to do this? I'm like, I don't know. So I started and stopped, working, looking at tutorials and trying to apply stuff. And right now I'm back in that phase of like, let's find a colorist, maybe, maybe an intern. I ended up having a local high school deliver me some interns. I don't know how that came about. I guess like you, I kind of fell into it. Somebody put me in touch with an intern person at a high school for an art high school. And, I gave them some information and then all of a sudden these interns showed up one day and I'm like, I never said yes. But here you are, let's design a mural project.
Right? Everything works.
Yeah. And then, the next week, everything closed up because of the coronavirus and stuff. So they're maybe being homeschooled. I don't know. Might be their spring break too, but probably won't see them until May. And then they'll have like, okay, two weeks of internship. And it's like, then summer break. But
come on, Dan, let's get that internship online. Just transition it.
Yeah, true. Well, I did reach out to them and unfortunately I've got to CC their
supervisor.
Teacher. Yeah, their supervisor. So unfortunately that's probably not going to happen. when you involve adults, that just generally does not happen.
It always ruins
But-
everything.
But at the same time, it's probably for the best, because it's like, why are these, teenagers hanging out with this strange guy? So yeah, there'll be another time.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, Steve, one thing that I don't think we really touched up on, and I know you got into, you were into Mad Magazine, and you stayed away from more conventional comics for the most part, the superhero stuff. It seems like as a kid. What else were you into? What really inspired you to go the creative writing path?
So I was going to be an architect. I loved blocks and Legos were my just Jones. I built houses and I built game show sets out of both of them. That's kind of all I was ever into. So I feel like I should have been a scenic designer or a architect. And then I was like, okay, architecture, love this, love how I was, as a 12-year-old, I'd be like going to these model home showcases and really like grooving on the difference between the 3-bedroom and the 4-bedroom and how did they put that other bathroom in. Like, I've always seen myself from space, like long before GPS. I've seen everything from overhead in my mind. So
Cool.
floor plans were always good for me. I can go in a place and draw it, the floor plan, just like from standing in a room. I can spatially figure all that out. So I was like, okay, this is it. And I bought a drafting board and the triangles and the ruler with the little slot on the end, whatever. And then I took a high school drafting class and I got like a D because I literally could not make a line that was the least bit clear. I couldn't get any of the angles right. And I was like, this is not a beginning to a drafting career for show. And it was before computers. So I was like, well, that's not going to work. So I said goodbye to all that. Not around the same time, much earlier, my 4th grade teacher, Mrs. Maxwell in Colorado, right when we had moved from California to Colorado, would read to us every day. She'd make us put our heads down on the desk, and then she'd read like a chapter of a book. And I was like, I am not a 2-year-old. I don't need my head down on the desk. And then at the end of the school year, she was reading this book called The Blue Man. And it was like about a blue man and this teenage kid. And the blue man was like this creepy stalker, like, what's the blue man doing? And is he murdering people? And this kid became on the run from the blue man. I don't know why this was being read to us in 4th grade. And I was super into it. And then the school year ended, but there was a chapter left. So I had no idea what happened to the blue man or what happened to the kid at all. And then we moved. So I couldn't get the book out of the school library. My new library didn't have the book. This was before the internet. It was not easy to find things. I would look for it in bookstores about it. I think I became obsessed with what happened to the blue man, and it made me want to start finishing that story. And so I started writing stories about the same time, just, prose stuff. And when I got into comics, I wasn't into it. My buddy Eric was, as I said. And I would just judge them. I'd read. He was into Spider-Man, so I started buying everything that wasn't, so that he wouldn't know anything about it, and I could just say whatever I wanted. So that was X-Men, Marvel Premiere, Iron Man. And I would read them, and they were actually pretty good. But I'd be like, oh, that wasn't good. I could have done better, like you do with comic books.
Yeah.
And, running scenarios in my head of how I would make it better. And at some point, Eric was like, shut up and send in a proposal, or I don't want to hear that anymore. And that's when I was in college. I sent in a proposal. Sorry about that.
Oh, no problem.
I have to call you back. I'm doing an interview. It's the wife's parents. I have to answer and not ignore. So I sent in Kafka and it got bought and I was like, oh crap, what do I do? So I got into superhero comics at that time. I loved them. I loved the X-Men. When I got offered to do the X-Men, I actually turned it down because I didn't want to ruin that thing I loved by working on it, which I've found. I love Drum and Bugle Corps, which is like marching bands on acid. And I worked in them slightly for like a minute. And I was like, no, I got to back away and just like it. Not everything should be a job.
Yeah. That's pretty interesting. Yeah. I think a lot of creators do kind of, when they get a job or, they get offered a project, they do kind of have to reflect on whether they want to, participate in that in such a way that, they could be perceived as, screwing things up or or adjusting things to the point where, you know, it's no longer that thing that you love.
Yeah, it's not even, well, I won't say it's not that. It can be that. Obviously, everything works. But I think the real thing is, do you have something to bring to it? You know,
Yeah.
all artists, I think you were talking about this the other day with somebody on your podcast, but the real thing is, what do you have to say through that character, through that mode, through that type of storytelling?
Right.
You know, there are like, I could learn Ableton and I understand music enough that I can plunk some notes down and make a, in quotation marks, song. But if I don't have something to communicate via that mode, what I make is meaningless. And so a lot of times people read, you know, I love Daredevil. I read Frank Miller's Daredevil. I loved it. I like Bendis's Daredevil too. And I often go, why didn't I do my own Daredevil? And the answer is, I don't have anything to say via Daredevil.
Yeah.
It's much better for me to enjoy Daredevil by people who had something to say than for me to wrangle that job and then not say anything through it.
Yeah.
And I've done a couple of comics where I took a job because I needed to take the job for health insurance, or, you know, because it seemed like it would be fun, but I didn't think it through. And those books are my weak books, you know, and the books that I do that I go, I have to do Get Naked. I have to do the Red Diary, you know, and turn the book over. I have to do whatever. Those are my good books because I have something to say. I did a run on Superman for a year that I talked about, where I didn't really, not only did I think I had something to say and I couldn't say that because I was told to do something else, but I didn't think of something new to say. And that run is lukewarm. But I did a Vertigo Superman book called It's a Bird. I had something very concrete to say. I said it, and I love that book. That book, you know, I have people come to me all the time and go, that book moved me this way or that way or what. It's because it was me having something I needed to communicate that way. Yeah. And that's the big difference. Like, just liking something is not enough to make something.
Right. Right. Yeah. With that in mind, is there, you know, an existing, you know, property that you'd like to approach that you feel you have something to say?
Well, the fun thing is that Man of Action gets approached a lot to redo IP, you know, like we did a new Mega Man cartoon last year. And so I have that itch is scratched via that channel for me. You know, I think the only things, like the things I love Twin Peaks. You know, I heard there was a fourth Twin Peaks, and I was like, sign me up for the writer's room. I'm all over that. But again, I think what I love about Twin Peaks, I should probably observe. I shouldn't go make it. You know, if I go make it, I'll both know how the soup's made and not like it as much. But also, well, you need input and output if you're a creative person. Yeah. And so drum corps for me is an input. Baymax from Big Hero 6 is named after a Japanese drum and bugle corps that I liked and felt nobody knew about. And I was like, I'm going to name this thing Baymax so people know them forever. Nice. I wouldn't be thinking that way about it if I was doing it. So Twin Peaks is something I want to watch, not something I need to work on. Right. The answer to your question is I never know. Like, people approach us and go, do you want to work on blank? And I go, yeah, I love blank. And then after a week I go, but I don't want to work on it. Or, but I want to work on it. I have something to say. So it is just, you know, if you bring me Ghidra, which I grew up being Ghidra in the backyard, I have to really check myself and go, do I have something to say about Ghidra, or am I just geeking out because I like Ghidra? Yeah. If I'm just geeking out, I probably should not work on it.
That's a pretty good way to evaluate the situation.
Works for me. Other people's might vary.
Well, and you know, I wonder too if you know, if so many other creative people, you know, really have that level of self-reflection and can have that conversation with themselves.
I didn't. I mean, I'll be honest. You know, when you're a newer creator, you're just praying somebody will hire you to do something. Right. And then when you're an older creator, you're still praying somebody will hire you to do something. So the difference is literally a learned just trial and error where you go, I should not have done everything I did. Right. You know, at the time you think you should, but really you shouldn't. And again, you don't always have the luxury of saying no. But when you do, you should really dig deep and say no if no is the right answer. Right. Right. No, that's pretty good. So, you know, we've got a few more minutes here, but I wanted to see, you know, what other, you know, projects you might have in the works that you might want to talk about. Let me look at the rack and see if there's anything cool back here.
Yeah. Let's look at your gift shop.
Yeah, the gift shop is jamming. So I know
what are the hours for the gift shop?
if I'm home, which is all the time, it's open.
True.
Since we have a lot of horror people, for you young horror people, midnight. Maybe it should go this way. Number one, number two. Which I have a lot of parents going, what of your comics can my kids read? And I'd be like, none of them, because they're all pretty dark and twisted, because my comics tend to be more dark and twisted. And so I started doing some kids stuff, including Camp Midnight, which is like a horror young reader book series about this girl who winds up the only human kid at a monster camp. And in the first book, it's about, is that a problem? Do you out yourself as a human, or is that dangerous? Do you try to pass as a monster, or is that and then the second book is about how bad sequels suck and how Monster Camp might have been better than the camp you wanted to go to. So there's that. That's still available from Image Comics or your local retailer who's struggling and could use you to go pick up that campy copy of Camp Midnight that they bought and thought somebody would buy and didn't buy yet. So that.
Some of those stores also have curbside service too. Yeah, so just call them up or order your book and pick them up.
I'm gonna camera over because I can't get this book out. It's wedged.
Ooh.
Can you see Bachelor?
Oh, cool. Yes, I think I got that for Elise. As well as the Camp Midnight books.
And there's Frankenstein. So if you like
and the
Frankenstein picture book, then those are a couple. That's a possibility. I did House of Secrets long ago for Vertigo.
Nice.
Wall-to-wall experimental horror that they put out as a super long omnibus a couple years ago. And then I'm always working on new stuff. I don't talk about my work until it's out. Because it's not a superstition, it's a truth with me, which is that if I talk through something like in the press or to a friend or whatever, I don't do it. Okay. I go, I've talked through it with you, then I'm done. I did all the work. I have to really keep it a little more bottled up to make sure I finish the thing. Yeah. So I've got a comics project with Dean Ormston that'll be out, hopefully, if the universe writes itself sometime next year. I've got a project I'm trying to work on with a new artist in Argentina that this whole crisis is making us rethink how are we doing it and turn it into something else. And then a bunch of TV projects. I always have a bunch of TV projects. Sometimes they get optioned, sometimes they get written. They rarely get made, but I have 4 different live action TV things that I'm working on presently.
Nice. And essentially, with the current situation, that's how you're coping, just, dive into work?
Well, I love to work anyway. My wife's a worker, I'm a worker. I'm happy when I'm working on stuff. So I'm working with a creator in London who is like, you really want to get up this early and work because of the time difference? I'm like, I do. I love getting up early to work. So yeah, I'm not doing a lot different. From the 90s to the aughts, I sat in my room and typed all day. Now I'm doing that again. So the production part of it is, it's weirder to do that from home. We can't do voice records for cartoons, but we can do the rest of it from home. So writing and, mixes and notes on animatics, scratch dialogue, I can do all of that stuff, and I'm just doing it at home.
Nice. Well, with everybody else, experiencing this, would you be able to recommend any activities or anything to kind of, connect with communities?
I've always been about structure. I like structured storytelling forms. I like structure to my day. I have a weekly writers group on Thursday, and it has it's very set agenda that everybody has to follow. And I find that structures help me be productive. So the minute this hit, and I was like, oh crap, we definitely are not leaving the house. Yeah. I went into Saturday and Sunday are weekends. I'm not working at all. I'm doing all the house shit I haven't done for decades. Monday morning, I'm waking up at 7 o'clock. I'm doing 50 push-ups. I'm taking a shower. I'm eating breakfast. And by 8:30, I'm at my desk writing. And I'm writing until 12:30. And at 12:30, I'm stopping and I'm going back to the house. My garage is where my office is. They're separate. I'm going back to the house. I'm eating lunch. I'm eating lunch until 1:15, and I'm reading comics while I eat lunch so I don't interrupt my wife who's working there. And then at 1:15, I'm back at my desk, and I'm going to work until 6. And at 6, I'm going to find some online dude who's got a dumbbell and body weight exercise regimen, because I usually go to the gym at 6, but I got to make that happen at home somehow. And I get very into the schedule, so that as opposed to feeling like I got all my cool shit here, I love hanging around. I like cleaning out a closet more than I like working. I like fixing rain gutters and stuff. So I can easily just go into an abyss of doing nothing for my job and spending the next. I took a year off once, and I was busy the whole time. I didn't do any writing, but I was not bored. So I fear I will wind up there again unless I create a system that has some normalcy and makes me work.
Yeah.
And then on Thursdays, instead, because our Korean spa where we all go is closed, and it's, there's 100 people on the group and 20 show up about every week. And so one of the guys converted it all to a Facebook group, and we are, I send out the alert going, make sure you're there on Thursday, 9:45, and then we start our system. And then at 1:30 or not 1:30, 12:45, we have lunch. And now we're doing that as a Zoom, and people can still talk at lunch, and then they have to go back to working. And so like, just trying to keep your life, it's not as you know it, but how much as you know it can you fake it?
Yeah. Yeah. And then, innovate to make things work.
Yeah. Everything works. My motto. It's been very good for being quarantined.
Nice. Until, next year when you got to change it all up again.
Oh yeah. No, I warn people, like when I go teach my classes, I'm like, here's what I believe with my heart and soul, but next year I will believe something else. So be forewarned. And that's usually true.
Mantra jumping.
Yeah. I think you mantra jump to try to pull what works from each mantra and keep amassing a totality.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. Well, Steve, it was fantastic seeing you and being able to talk to you on this. I'm gonna wrap this up real quick, but thanks again for being so generous with your time.
Thanks for having me. It's dawned on me now that I've been looking at the button on my iPad instead of the camera, so I think this will come across as I don't know what's happening.
Oh, that's okay. I always come across as not knowing anything about what's going on in my environment. I'm kind of like the president.
Not.
All right. I'm gonna. So anyway, everybody out there, thanks for tuning in. We'll do another one of these here pretty soon. But it's been fun, Steve. Thanks so much.
Thanks a bunch. See you soon.